Here in Effective Project Management, my name is Nora Medlin, and I live in Joliet, but I've lived quite a few states across the country in the last 15 or 20 years of my software development experience. Depending upon how you look at it, I actually did start more in the software development side of things and moved into project management here at MediaCurrent within the last couple of years. And I really love to work with great people, and that's why I work with an agency versus corporate environment. That's a good passionate drive of mine. And one interesting fact about myself, I'm not practicing right now, but I do participate from time to time in an organization called the Society for Creative Anachronism. We're a medieval reenactment organization. So think Ren Fair, but not actors. It's real people going to camping and doing what we call wars, where we beat each other up with sticks. So it's a really good time. I would say as skills go, we're here at Drupal MidCamp, and so Drupal is definitely on the top of the list. I also have a strong background in Linux Bash, coming from the development side of things, to do with REST APIs, and I also have a drive for entrepreneurship in general. I was a freelancer consultant for 7 to 8 years prior to coming to MediaCurrent. I really tried to do my own single owner agency for a while, and I just didn't have a lot of people around me, and that's why I'm here at an agency today. So that's me. I will go ahead and turn it over to Eric, our Senior Technical Project Manager here
at
MediaCurrent as well.
I've been with MediaCurrent for 2 years now, and been in the PM space since 2014. Recently got my CSM, which is pretty cool. And today I'm going to give you some stories from some different build projects that I've been on in the past, but my bread and butter at the moment is actually manage some of our largest retainer clients that we have with MediaCurrent. And nerdy fact about me, I love to play card games. And if you ever played Magic the Gathering, I once won a tournament 20 years ago. And we had, shortly after I joined MediaCurrent, I don't know why we never did this again, maybe it's because I was too good, but we had a speed typing contest, and I came to find out that I was the fastest typer at the company. So sometimes people will be in meetings with me and they'll just hear me going. So yeah, we're here today to talk to you guys about just some tips and tricks that we've collected from managing projects, and I want to give you examples where I can, and Nora's going to get us started.
Sure, yeah. I would say that a big part of the success of a project is setting up the overall structure, but also getting started on the right foot. So one thing that we've been working on at MediaCurrent, and I've seen that most agencies do a really good job at, is getting things done. But it's sometimes that getting started that's really difficult. So some key areas that we've found essential to this focus is on initial communication with the client and your internal team. So we'll go over that first, and then we'll dive into some different ways to think about how to run projects in a way that will reduce overages, improve efficiencies, limit frustration. I think the frustration part is really the thing that I'm mostly focused on, honestly. I do apologize. Let me make this bigger if I can. Okay, here we go. Periodically, though, through the session, I just wanted to mention this, that we will be going over some Q&A instead of waiting till the end. I think that I'd like this to be more interactive if possible, so I'd love to hear some experiences that you've had as well. So getting started, come on now. Getting started. When talking about the business and team client building, we also want to include some understanding about inclusion and transparency during that initial kickoff process. We're going to go over that a little bit. But many agencies are getting great at contract signing, like I was saying earlier, that we're good at signing and implementing. However, often these delays can cause overruns when you're building the team itself or getting kicked off. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some of those issues there. As far as the resources are concerned, I just wanted to make sure to mention that I do apologize. I was just looking at my notes again. So for producers and production managers, we want to make sure that they're involved as soon as possible in the project as well. I think that that's something that we'd like to see all of our teams work towards, is having more of the team members involved earlier in the process. And part of that next step is going to be getting synced up between the project manager and those primary stakeholders. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric.
All right. So for those of you who do manage projects, does everyone feel like they have a pretty good sales handoff process with their account team? Could it be better? Yeah. So one thing that I like to do that I found that really helps a lot, and if you think of a project starting, it's kind of like the Big Bang. All these events happen in the tiniest amount of time, but it's so important to making things successful going forward. And what I like to do is, instead of jumping right to the kickoff call with the client and the team, I actually like to schedule an initial sync with me and the client. Because in most agency environments, at least in my experience, like you as the PM, you're coming in, the project's been sold, and you're just given some kind of like brief heads up or preparation from your account team, and it's kind of like, here's the client, here's 2 sentences about what they do, there you go, you're ready, right? Do it. So for having this initial sync, it lets you form your own impressions and perspectives about the client, which you can use as you prepare your kickoff presentation that you're going to have with the team. So another subtle benefit here is this actually reduces tension between both parties. I mean, if you think about meeting somebody for the first time, like, it's going to be awkward, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it might still be that way after a few times meeting that same person. But the key point here is it's going to be slightly less awkward. So by having this little conversation first with your stakeholder, it's really going to help set you up for success when you do have that kickoff meeting. And this can dictate how formal or informal you want to be going forward in the project. And then you can relay that to your lead technical contacts or whoever's going to be client-facing on the project going forward. So if we think about this like a happy hour versus formal dinner, like, this does not have to be a long call. I would time box this to like 30 minutes. Prefer the happy hour analogy, about 2 beers. So your sales team spent all this time warming up the client, and you want to get them warmed up to you, what your personality is like, what their style is like, gauge their comfort level, and kind of find out, like, are they a power user of their own site? Do they have a development background? Are they a non-technical person who is going to need a lot of high-level breakdowns? You can kind of suss all of that out with this first conversation with them. And then another key element here is keep the audience size small. So if you're on a bigger project that has a ton of stakeholders, try and limit this to whoever's going to be your primary day-to-day contact, or if it's a smaller project, you could just bring in all the stakeholders if the audience size is like 1 to 3. I found that to be most comfortable when having this call. Once you have this, you'll be set up to, whether you're going to send an email, which Nora will talk about next, or just immediately jumping into and scheduling dates for your kickoff team and getting that presentation put together.
So yeah, speaking of that email, I would say that if you already have a relationship established with your client, let's say that you are on a previous engagement, or you're in a support contract and you're moving into a build engagement, you don't necessarily need to have that sync because you already are familiar with that client. But it may be useful if it's a changeover with PM, so still, it would be valuable there. Otherwise, you might just send out an email to just get things kicked off. It's signed. We're going to go ahead and kick this off. When should we meet? Who should be involved? And this is the bit to do with inclusion. So we also recommend that you go ahead and include a statement, or maybe a good idea to do so, just to double check to make sure if there's anybody that might have some needs. Could be just as simple as needing to take a break every 30 minutes or something like that. But generally, it's a good inclusion there as well. Let me just make sure I covered everything. Yep. Okay. So next, I do apologize. Here we go. We just wanted to open this up. I wanted to ask the room, what do your initial communications with your clients look like? Do you have anything in specific that you like to include, or that you like to think about when, meeting your clients for the first time, when it's a sales handoff and now you're meeting that client for the first time, something like that?
So we have like a document that we have them fill out, which is all of the details of everything we need access to, right?
Sure.
So instead of having to try and figure it out along the way, but that's part of that email that we sent.
That initial email usually asks for
We
that?
said, okay, here's all our questions that we have, and then can you also fill out this document as well, which is really helpful.
Yeah, I can definitely see capturing some of that access information is essential as part of that initial communication. Anybody else have an item? Sure.
I tend to do an initial kickoff that I call like a coffee chat, where it's like a little bit more informal, but my style is a little bit more informal with my clients. As you mentioned, like kind of like a happy hour, just like warm things up, get to know who's who in the zoo, and then
Coffee chat. I like it. Yeah.
So like we'll like literally just grab a virtual coffee essentially.
Or if we're getting back to in person, maybe it is in person.
Yeah, or
right?
yeah, exactly. If it's an in-person kickoff, then it's like a physical coffee.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you. So, in speaking of kicking off, that kickoff workshop, especially what we're talking about is on the client-facing side. This can be a more formal workshop where we're getting all those stakeholders together, and we are doing that kickoff meeting with all those particular key contacts from the client side to include at least the leads on your side as well. There may be other individuals that you do not include from your side. It really depends, again, on the size of your team on both sides. But this kickoff workshop can be a really great way to not only break the ice with all of your team members who are going to be working together on both sides, but also get some better feel about what the stakeholders are looking for to get out of the project. And it may be more. We're talking like there's department leads potentially on the client side. They're going to be involved with this workshop as well. So it's good to sometimes let them voice their needs out in the open. Maybe those department heads haven't worked together before, had the opportunity. So it could be an opportunity there for them to get to know each other. So you might have some exercises within that workshop like that icebreaker, but you also probably want to talk about their goals and what they're looking for there, and it will help to feed into the next steps around meeting cadence and things that we may not have covered quite yet, in the stage of the process. So there's that kickoff workshop. Now, speaking of the kickoffs, you not only want to have a kickoff for your external client-facing, but you also want to have an internal kickoff. So similar, we're going to have our project team, though, on the internal side, that we are going to have maybe what you want to call like more of a rah-rah meeting, that we're just, getting together, getting to know each other. Again, in an agency especially, you might not have worked with all of the team members that you're going to work with on that particular project previously. Maybe those team members have never worked with each other, so it's good for them to get to know each other, have some space to also talk about what their needs are, their ways of work, their specific preferred communication, that sort of thing that might be needed. So now we've gotten through the kickoffs. We're ready to go, right? But what's next? I mean, I think that one fault or one thing that can happen a lot in projects is, you've started, you know what the project's about, but where do you start? What's next? You really need to keep that drive going and not lose that steam. One way to kind of get in that direction, one tool, may be to use a receipt analysis. Now, you don't necessarily have to formally do this every single time. I think on larger projects, especially if you have a larger project management team on the internal side, or lots of leads that are going to be communicating with the client, it may be useful to go through an exercise like this to determine how frequent and what level of communication that you're going to need to include which individuals from the client side. This may also, and I think you might have a story here, Eric, about how this has worked for you on workshops in the past, or in kickoffs in the past.
Yeah, so admittedly, I am not an artistic person by any means. So oftentimes, I don't even create a formal graphic like this. What I've found that works best for me is I like to maintain some kind of accessible, like note page or Confluence page where I can note down my stakeholders, kind of talk about who's who, what do they do, who needs to be contacted in what situation, and that can really help. Especially when you, the PM, are going to be out, or if there's a transition of PM, so you don't have to go through that, awkward transition, with your stakeholder and the new PM or your backup person. They can immediately just refer to this page. They'll know exactly, hey, Barbara's out today. I've got this thing that needs to get done for UAT. I have to contact Tiffany instead about this. Makes your life a whole lot easier. So. One thing I can share, I have a higher ed client, and they fit all around this matrix here. And it's kind of crazy because my day-to-day client is an extreme shmee. Like, she's the kind of person on her Drupal site, like, she'll check the error logs daily and ping me on Teams if something seems awry. But on the flip side, she's actively engaged, and she wants to be informed, but our actual decision maker on this project, the head of marketing for this university, she falls in the far left of the top corner there for keeping satisfied. Like, this person, she will actively cringe if I mention Jira ticket numbers, so I have to remember to never do that with her and explain everything just in terms of how does it affect the bottom line for their marketing department or their registration department. But being able to have these notes and then share them with my internal team is super helpful, especially for anyone else that's going to be communicating with the client. So, like, I'm here today at BidCamp, and my lead technical director is acting on my behalf while I'm gone, so he knows exactly who to reach out to in this case.
Awesome, thank you, Eric. One other last bit is, what is the next step? So I think it's always good practice in general, after any sort of meeting, any decisions made, that you follow that up with a summary. I think that it also just keeps it going. I think that we're saying, if we're thinking what's next all the time, it keeps the team not only external and internal focused, but just thinking about what those next steps are and getting along in the project. So this may include, this email, if you did want to formalize it, may include what that next specific milestone is, or a top-level timeline of the entire project. So that may be some exercises that you would do, again, internally prior to sending out this summary. Now, we don't have a Q&A quite yet, so I do apologize, a little bit more talking here. But I think this is like the real interesting part that you may find valuable for this session here today. One thing that I found, especially in freelance consulting that I did previous, is there's always this lead up time to implementation where you really have to capture that information. And that email that you were talking about with the form to fill out of access information, that's one part of it, but sometimes it's more than that, right? It's about how is their system really working the way that, does it work the way that they think that it works? Are their goals in alignment with the, what they're looking for in the technology? There's lots of questions to be asking. And sometimes you can't make the best recommendation until you do this discovery piece in general. So you may have a situation where, right, where you have like a cart before the horse sort of syndrome going on, that you also inadvertently may subject your clients to like this sort of smoke and mirrors sort of phase of the project where you're promising a lot of big things, but you're not necessarily really showing them anything of particular value just because you're trying to get through maybe a sales proposal or something like that. Can be a very uneasy portion of our phase of the project is this initial sort of phase. And to avoid this pitfall, I think that it's imperative that we set clear criteria as far as the goals are of the project, for sure. You know, a scope, that's always a big thing that we want to be focused on. But we also, you know, want to think about this discovery first to help bridge that gap between strategy and implementation. So let's take a quick look at what a world without a discovery first approach might look like. We might, you know, get that proposal and sign off here first, and then we move into some design and proof of concept on the technology side potentially. But we found out some things. So I think we might have to go back and get a change order. I think we might need more money. We already know that we might need more stuff in order to attain the goals of this project. So we go back, okay, we're going to continue now into the next phase. Let's see if we can go ahead and build this thing now. Well, what do we have? Maybe, again, during build, you get to dig in with all the nits and grits and everything, and you find out you just need more stuff. You need more time, you need more resources, you need more, something more. Anything we forgot about, on both sides, potentially. So, I think I do want to ask here, right away, like, what are some challenges with this process beyond maybe even what I just mentioned? One thing that I might suggest is that you aren't really getting paid necessarily for this discovery portion of the process. Sometimes this comes before sales is even signed off, right? Sometimes we're preparing, you know, this sort of information about what to expect. So you may not even get paid for some of this. That's a risk. But you also just don't know what you don't know, and you can be easily caught up in this change order sort of cycle. You know, it could be way more than these loops. It could be, you know, 5 or 6 before you're really in the meat of the actual build implementation. You have a clear line of success towards that launch. So, have you experienced this? I mean, I feel like I've experienced this a lot in the past, you know, with consulting and especially, but also in agencies in general. Any particular stories that you'd like to share that were kind of, I guess, in a way, a disaster? I don't know. Maybe it worked out really well, but you didn't have any idea what you were doing at first.
Not a detailed story, but I could share the recent experience that we are right now going through.
Yes, please.
So, discovery phase was there, and we agreed on a specific set of scope. But so wireframes were finalized.
Mm-hmm.
When we started designs, they kept on changing things, and we deviated a lot from what we were finalized in the wireframing, the discovery stage.
Sure.
So now currently we are in conversation on what was the purpose, the very purpose of that wireframe, the discovery phase, wherein
Sure.
the wireframes were being prepared based on the two-way conversation. So we are still trying to figure out the way of how we could hit the balance and stay on track rather than deviating too much from the defined scope of work in the wireframe discovery phase.
Yeah. I was wondering, during your discovery phase, did you have anything like a stakeholder interview type process or anything going on? Like, how involved were you? How much did you kind of do in that discovery phase?
So it took us around 2 weeks to complete the discovery phase, wherein there were a project lead from client side and the business owner, and from our end a tech lead and a business analyst. Total 4 people were involved, and then they were having constant conversations.
With the client
Yeah, with the
specifically?
client.
Yeah.
A documentation was prepared. They agreed upon it, and this more or less covers everything. Let's finalize the wireframing now. So
Sure.
The user flow. Let's complete that flow now. with certain sketches, which obviously are not the final designs.
Uh-huh.
So until then, it was fine. It all happened in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, we anticipated 2 weeks, but lasted for 3 weeks, which is okay. At times, I'm delaying the feedback, so understandable.
Yeah.
But now recently, we started designs
Mhm.
with the actual UI, interfaces in Photoshop, and now they're like, okay, can we do this? Can we do that? So we kept on agreeing to that, and eventually we realized that we have started deviating from what
The original
we did upon
scope,
in wireframes.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
now we are showcasing that, okay, it's not something that we want to argue about, but we just
Sure.
showcasing that this is what the wireframe was,
Mhm.
this is what the documentation was, and this is, here we are clearly deviating in designs. You are completely.
So you kind of going through that sort of discovery phase, you found that maybe it was making it clearer what that agreed scope was, and you had something to point to and kind of facilitate that
That was
conversation
the
that
very,
you might need to have.
very purpose of discovery phase, a single
Sure.
source of truth.
Right.
So, thankfully, we are still in the design phase.
Mhm.
I imagine if we are in the development phase,
Mhm.
how much rework.
So you were able to catch it earlier?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Able to
okay.
catch it early in a tricky situation.
Well, then you're leading right
Yeah.
into the next section here,
Well,
but
let
go
me-
ahead
yeah,
first.
I've got something that may be relatable for
Yes.
all you guys, and you can stop me at any time. I can keep going on this. So we'll start 2 words: fixed bid project. Next, D7 to D9. Client had a front-end developer on their side. They wanted to do decoupled with Gatsby. They would own all of the front-end development work. We got all the requirements up front. We start this project. We come to find out that they had built all their content in D7 using Panelizer, and there's no simple
And we're moving to Layout Builder, was it?
there's no simple
Oh,
like
geez.
migration path for us to migrate this content. So we're kind of stuck in this hole, and we have to have the uncomfortable conversation and tell them, hey guys, you're going to have to rewrite all of this content on the new site. And because of all of these stipulations and the fact that we didn't take the discovery first approach that Nora is suggesting, we had to end up compromising where our team allocated some time to helping them build some of the content on their site, which is super fun, right? Like me as the PM in the hot hours, creating lots of pages, and then actually using that to set up training videos for the client. So in some ways it ended up being a positive thing, but it's like situations like that, you could completely avoid that, if you were able to sort of separate discovery out of the process and have this separate engagement where you can get the client to buy in and pay for you to do all this research and come up with a plan that you're going to execute.
So leading into that, I think that this discovery first approach really is about empowering decision makers, not only on the client side, but also on the internal agency side as well. That what we're looking for here is, as you'd mentioned, we're talking about a separate engagement for this requirements and envisioning phase or discovery phase. That it can definitely be a selling point that the client can take before the build happens and potentially go to another agency. Sometimes they're not always sure about you. They're kind of testing you out and see how much you know or how much that you will be able to serve and partner with them. So that may be, I've seen that as a good tactic. Now, normally if you do a good job, you get the sale, in that way, that final, sort of build integration or implementation phase sell. But I would say that this discovery phase, like we were saying, it's all part of getting the nuts and bolts in order to outline your objectives for development, help define the roadmap to implementation, and having these objectives, like you were saying, helps to control scope creep. But also, you may find during that discovery process that your audience is different than what you might have initially thought, especially with that initial sync or even the kickoff. So there might be some stages in there where you want to go through some stakeholder analysis exercises and really dig into each of their roles and how they are using the site or what their expectations for their users are for that particular page or section. So you'll discover a lot I think that really the point is here is that you really want to be intentional with this discovery phase. One other benefit could be in doing this is that your earnings could be larger due to this as well. It's not just about not knowing what you don't know, but you may find opportunities, during this discovery phase that nobody thought about, and you may be able to take this into the initial implementation phase or into an additional supplemental phase afterwards at some point. One other thing that I thought I might mention as well, this is more on the internal side. I think that by doing this, you increase the velocity and interest among your internal team members as well. I think that one thing I've found is that if you have a fixed bid situation, you might have to extend in that other sort of scenario. And your internal team members might get fatigued or they have their own expectations about what they're moving on to. So it's never a fun thing to have to kind of switch up teams in the middle or near the end before launch, that sort of thing. So that might help to avoid those situations as well and increase your velocity and efficiency of your team. They feel like they have a more confidence in that success marker with the launch. So breaking up phases into phases like this provides an opportunity for trading. Just one other point. One other thing that you could do, though, that this might provide an opportunity is because that discovery phase is so well defined and intentional, if it is a very long, sort of large project that we're dealing with, there is an opportunity, I think, clearly between the discovery phase and the implementation phase where you could trade up your team if you needed to. And because you're able to package that up as a deliverable thing to not only your client but also your internal team, there may be an easier way to rebuild your team if you had to, or if bringing in new members for the implementation phase. But I would still think that in general you want to have most of the people, especially leads, that are going to be during the implementation phase, during the discovery phase as well. So they're around to kind of carry that knowledge through the entire project. So, one last section here, and then we'll get into some Q&A here at the end. But I did want to speak to this phasing kind of a general, more larger concept that found that I think if you look back 15 or so years ago when Agile was really starting to kind of become a thing, people didn't really think about what that meant on a project. I think that you still kind of fell into this waterfall method with large projects for a long, long time. Then we started to feel like we had an idea about how we could still do sprinting and Agile during a larger project, a larger implementation project. So in that way, that eased sort of way, I think, is through this phased approach. So just to think about what this kind of looks like on a general sort of diagrammy way is that you might have these phases here at the bottom, and there's more phases that are displayed here, but more or less that requirements and envisioning phase would be your discovery phase. It might include specific deliverables, which is in the circles here of determining needs. There initially with requirements. Envisioning would be the tech validation, prototype, and technical approach document. Those are the deliverables that I was talking about that you would be able to send over to your client at the end of the discovery phase. And then your build phase might overlap. You might have some design happening in your discovery phase just to get some wireframes in there to at least some high-level degree. But the bulk of your design would be in the build phase, including your implementation. You would have deployment that would go into that end part of the implementation, into testing as well, and you have your rollout with the launch. So, I think that what's kind of neat about this diagram, what I'm trying to display here, is that everything kind of feeds into the next thing. So we're thinking already about an iterative approach of taking the information from the previous deliverable and or phase and feeding into the next. I think I covered everything that I wanted to say here on this slide. One other thing. The naming conventions here, they're just for discussion. Don't think of them as too prescriptive here. I think I tried to be a little bit more generalized with the sort of standards on the naming conventions. But please, as agencies, rebrand for your own purposes. and needs. But the bottom line here is that the communication and project management strategies like this are the idea here is to improve those partnerships in a way that you have a win-win scenario between your client and yourself, and your team members, working with you every day. So one other thing I kind of wanted to touch on here is the agile portion of the phased approach. I kind of have a little bit of a graphic here that I can show you. So let's kind of focus in on a deliverable specifically, and you can kind of think of any of these deliverables, whether it's the technical approach documentation, the design, the proof of concept, whatever it is, even those initial requirements, and you can get people on both sides already starting to think about things in a sprint agile way. So what we're trying to say here is that it can still be valuable to break up even those phases that you typically wouldn't think of needing a sprinting. It still can be valuable because you can break up that work just like sprinting in general with agile. But also you can have like smaller chunks that you can deliver to the client. So let's think designs. We're talking about wireframes or full designs that they have to approve. So you might have a certain number of things that you're going to go ahead and deliver in that second or third sprint, and they can then have the opportunity to review during that particular period of time for that particular sprint, and you can kind of control like how much feedback that you're receiving at one time and for what. One of the projects that I had here more recently, we actually had a smaller budget, so we were able to put scope around there's only one feedback period per sprint type situation, meaning that there's an urgency here that we need to keep the timeline moving along. Sometimes you may have 2 rounds of feedback. It really depends upon your project, but you could control that, and you could say, well, I'm going to break it down into this, and I'm going to say, we're only going to do 1 round of feedback. We're going to give you 5 days to come back from your team about anything in particular that you saw on these pages that we delivered to you. And if you have anything, we'll incorporate that into the next. So, in that sense, as far as agile goes, we're still incorporating into the next sprint any sort of those recommendations that we got feedback on that we do want to take action on as well. I think that was a lot to kind of throw at you here for a second as far as the phased and agile. But I think one thing to mention here is the without. The one situation I've found, especially on the developer side, is this situation where we don't want a situation where designs are created in a silo, they're thrown over the fence to developers, they have lots of questions, legitimate questions, but if you don't have that design engaged, those designers still engaged with the team, or vice versa, you don't have the developers engaged with the team early on, you might have a lot of going back and forth and having to increase scope as well on your internal side with resourcing. So what's good about this phased approach, what I've found here personally, is that you're taking smaller chunks, especially with agile, you're feeding into the next, and you're keeping your team fairly consistent throughout the entire engagement. And we're talking multiple engagements here, the discovery phase engagement and your build implementation phase engagement. So let's get into Q&A. Has anyone, I think that's my big question here, has anyone, other than I think maybe one who's mentioned discovery phase so far, worked with a multi-phase approach? Do you have any particular stories that you'd like to share about it working well or not working well?
That's all we do is sprint agile format.
Do you do like a separate contractual, and like you sign different engagements for the discovery versus
exactly.
the build? That's
So
kind of my
actually
big question.
I actually just wrote down that our designs are created in a silo. That's our biggest problem. And that it would be amazing if we could actually design during our sprints, instead of we do wireframes and we do all the designs and we don't even annotate them right now. So I went to the Figma one yesterday and we need to annotate our designs, then we turn them over, and there's just always so many questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could just actually design And I don't think that we need to do like an agreement every single sprint, because our discovery is so good that we usually cover most of everything in there. Like, yes, every once in a while we'll come up with something during our sprint, but it makes it really easy for us to go, this goes afterwards, because it's not something that we agreed upon first in our discovery. So, but yeah.
But even maybe just having the devs in the room, you know, to just see what's going on with those
They
designs,
do,
right?
It's just still not enough.
Yeah,
It's not enough.
Yeah.
Not with the big, huge, complicated sites that we do.
yeah.
Like, we just don't cover enough detail in our designs. There's so much that they have to take on themselves and make decisions about.
Right.
That being able to like do that during the actual sprint process would be so beneficial. I don't even know if it's possible, because the clients are the hardest part, because they are so visual, they cannot think technically the way that we're presenting things to them, that they have to see the designs.
Oh,
They
for
just
sure,
can't-
yeah.
That's it. So it's like, how do you convince a client, we're gonna start building this and we're gonna design as we go? They're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
Like,
and I think what I've found to be is more, you know, focusing on what you're presenting during the design phase or the initial design phase during discovery, the wireframe sort of high level, is that you're producing prototypes that you have demoable, you know, to the client for them to see what that interaction is.
Yeah.
But you're probably right. I mean, I don't think honestly that there's an easy way to start doing implementation at the same time exactly. Though, what am I thinking here? Proof of concept. Maybe some ways that you could get the devs to really start thinking about how certain things are really going to work.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, well, I don't know how that would size this way when you go to, you know, different viewport widths, or I don't know how that would look when you scroll down the page and this thing's sticky. You know, there's lots of different things that could happen there that kind of, it gets revealed with implementation, right?
Maybe we bring in wireframes into our discovery, because we don't do that right now.
Yeah.
Wireframes are always separate from that. We have all kinds of technical documents that we use in our discovery phase, ERDs and all these other things, but we don't start wireframes until after that. So wireframes and designs go together.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something to consider, is pulling our wireframes into our discovery phase.
Cool.
Yeah.
We do a sprinted phased approach as well. We also do a full discovery that happens as like a bucket of hours before going into that phase. We've recently started implementing, because we were running into the same issues, where at the end of each phase we do almost like a mini retro, where we effectively just like scope reassess at every phase.
Yeah.
We also have, I mean, I think this is like more of like a talent issue than it is anything else, but having developers that have design backgrounds that you then incorporate in that design process. Like we have a couple people like that with that specific skill set,
Right.
which is like technology specific skill set. But it really helps ensure that there's like a smooth transition from that wireframe to like design to dev.
Cross-functional experience,
that's
absolutely, yeah.
And like, I mean, he's obviously a gold star. Like, it's hard to get people like that, but it's
That's right. Protect them at all costs.
Yeah.
Did you have any other stories you wanted to share?
Off the top of my head, does anybody else have questions they want to ask?
Yes.
What's an ideal percentage of the discovery phase as compared to the project size? How much duration should the discovery phase consume?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard to really put a percentage to it. You know, it's one of those it depends sort of answers, where I think that a discovery phase would probably be larger if the client needs some more strategic direction than, you know, some clients come to you and they know exactly what they want. You know, that's that kind of client. So you may or may not have as much strategic work to do with that client. But you also, on the other side, may have some more work to do to convince them of not going in some particular directions that they're very hard set on as well. So there may be some more work about the prototyping, you know, and designs and, you know, this interactivity, you know, just to get an idea of how that actually feels from a usability perspective, or for, you know, whatever that may be. So I don't know. I'm not sure I can really pin down a percentage. I've seen anywhere from like 10% discovery to like 60%. Sometimes it's very heavy.
I think you also have to like look at it a little bit as like an investment back in the project, right? Like the more hours that you have upfront in your discovery phase, the more money they might end up potentially saving in the long run. I've had a project where we had like a 30% discovery, which seems like a lot of discovery.
But I also
ended up
have
saving- yeah.
I don't know if you've had this too, but I've also had clients that end up spending a lot more with you because you go through this sort
And
of
you, like, uncover-
intentional,
yeah.
you know, sort of way of
9
doing
times out of
things.
10, you're starting a project when you know the least about it. So a client says, tell me how much this thing is going to cost.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I can't
Right.
because I don't know what this thing is.
Right.
So you're asking me to tell you the most about your project when I know the least about it. So the discovery gets you to that place. Like, in my opinion, there's no way to do a project without a discovery.
Right.
Like, even if you
But to
claim
get
you're
paid
doing
for it,
without-
that's the big
even if
thing,
you claim
right?
you're doing it without a discovery, your first 2 weeks of any project become a discovery.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
whether
they
it's
do.
called that or not.
You're gonna
sprint
do it at
zero,
some point.
Whatever you want to label
Yeah.
it, it becomes that, like, we have to do the fact finding, we have to get the project set up, we have to do all this stuff. We have to actually figure out what this thing is we're doing,
Right.
because clients don't know, like, they just don't understand, especially when you're talking about like a Drupal build, which presumably we're talking about Drupal projects here.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
they
most-
don't know what it takes to do this stuff.
Sure.
Most of them.
Sure.
And if they do know, they probably come to you at the wrong point in time. And like, you're not going to be setting up project management like this. You're going to be throwing a support dev on it, and they just rip on tickets.
Good point.
Well, and maybe they might be, you know, really good Drupalists, but they just don't know strategically for their business, you know, where they really want to take it to the next level, and that's why they're coming to you as well. Or they might not even know that that's what they need, and that's where you
Right.
step in to help with that. So I don't know, maybe I'm totally off with this. Does everybody do discovery first approach and I didn't even realize? Are we doing it already, guys? I mean, like, I feel like this hasn't been happening for a very long time, you know, so not too long ago.
I think it's
And
tricky.
now
figuring out the
it's maybe
pricing.
changing.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, the question I think more is, are we getting paid for it? Because I think I still hear stories where this is kind of this discovery, this audit, you know, kind of happens prior to the initial sale at all. It's part of the sort of initial proposal process, and you might spend quite a lot on that internally before seeing a penny. Anybody have that situation right now? Okay, so it still happens. All right.
So, I mean, like I said, we do a bucket of hours, and there's so many hours that you're like.
I mean, sometimes it's inevitable, right? Sometimes it's
Every
inevitable.
company that gives away a free discovery is diluting the market for
Yeah.
everybody else.
We don't ever do that.
Good.
We're always.
That makes me happy. Go ahead.
And we're coming from different angles, people in this room. I'm a small, growing
Yeah,
agency
sure.
with a very small team where I'm the sales and the project manager, and I've got a small team of developers. And our approach, I couldn't tell you what our approach is because it varies from project to project because I'm learning, and so we don't
Oh, yeah.
have a fixed way of doing this. I'm trying to do better with things like discovery.
Well, I hope this might have been helpful to you
Sure.
to some degree. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always interested in these
Yeah.
discussions. I just wanted to sort of ask, as you're talking about discovery and
Sure,
getting paid
sure,
for it,
yeah.
I've heard theoretically about a model in which the discovery is almost like a product, where there's a deliverable. And it's almost like you're gonna pay us to do this discovery, and we're gonna give you a document at the end that even if you might take this to a different
Right.
developer.
Yes.
Right.
I've heard about that theoretically. Is that a mythical beast, or is that real?
That's
True.
all we do.
That's
Yep.
the way.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you're charging for discovery, you're actually giving them a deliverable?
Yes.
Absolutely, and
Yes.
it's a bunch of really super technical documents, which is actually something that I wanted to ask everybody, because ours is a bunch of super technical documents that the client goes, sounds good, and then they're completely wrong. And we get into it, and just so that we had a 1,500 hour project, and we are 1,500 hours over right now. And it's because we missed some crazy key elements to the site, and it's a D7 to D9 transition, and it's somebody else gave us the designs, and it was an absolute disaster. And we had to fire a PM over it too, because it was such a mess.
Oh wow.
Were you on the same project I was on?
I know. And that's my question is just to your point, yes, these discoveries, yes, we get paid for them, but they're not necessarily helping us right now because the client goes, okay, cool, like, sounds good.
Well, yeah, you bring up a great point. You're kind of on the other side of things, right? That design has been done by some other agency. So what do you do in that situation? How much discovery can you convince your client to do
Exactly.
again?
And that's what
right?
it was. Is they're like, we're not like here's your designs. Tell us how much this is going to cost. So we went through a full sales process. But I wrote a note that I have to talk to the owner of the company and be like, we cannot do builds without a discovery anymore. We literally can't. It doesn't matter if you have all the designs. It doesn't matter if it came from somebody else.
Mhm.
We have to do a discovery. But my whole entire point is that it doesn't. The discovery also probably didn't really matter because
Yeah.
the client didn't know what they were looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing that I found to be useful during that discovery phase is to try not to be too technical about it. Like when we're saying technical approach, we're just talking about a general, we've done some proof of concept, we've done some high level designs, that should be like, this is where I think it probably should go. This is like general recommendations on the strategic direction of this or that from a technical perspective. But yeah, I don't think that you can really answer all of the questions until you get into implementation. I think this is more about like just easing into that a little bit more so that you're not completely out of line when you get to that implementation phase, right? So that's a difficult situation. Maybe you need to do a talk on.
Can I give you a
come back and tell us how you solved that.
Don't
Go ahead.
don't go to your owner and say we can't do a project without discovery. Owners don't like that.
She will listen. She's almost there right now.
But
She's pretty close.
You can reframe it, which is we have to build these checkpoints into a project, which say we have to have a sprint zero, and it's just you're calling discovery something different without telling the client like you have to do this thing you've already done again. So like think about ways to like you're right, you have to do that, but I can tell you from lots and lots of experience, like your team will do audits and they're gonna miss something here and there. Like you might have the best audit process in the world, and the client's like, you get 3 weeks in, and the client's like, well, what about like this integration that nobody knows about that somebody built 10 years ago and it sits in my nephew's basement.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that's like actually another 400 hours of migration work that we didn't know about. So I think it's easier to build in, especially if you're talking, clients that are 1,500 hour budgets or 2,000 hour budgets, they understand, like, let's build in some checkpoints along the way. And I find that to be a little easier than, like, we have to redo what we already did, even though it's just like a framing. It's that psychological, they have a sunk
Like a
cost.
budget checkpoint where it's like, hey, we're
Yeah, a
really
milestone.
actually analyzing
What
whether or
you
not
got.
we're.
And then framing everything to strategic goals. Like to your point, like the clients can't understand, we're gonna do this migration and it's gonna be this upgrade, and they don't, depending on where that stakeholder matrix you had up, depending on where they're sitting in that, Drupal 7 versus Drupal 9 means nothing to them. Now the developer or the marketing department chair, they might understand the benefits of that, but like it's all about tying it then to like the strategic goals and the road mapping. So I think about the discovery as giving them this giant roadmap that says, look, this is how we're going to hit your strategic business goals, and don't necessarily worry too much about the technical things. We'll let you know if we're going to change the budget along the way. That's just like the reframing. Again, it's like, I get it because I'm an owner and I do sales and I understand dev and I've been down all these roads. And so for me, there's things that trigger me, even though I know what they mean. Like when my PM comes and says like, we can't do a project without X. It's like, well, we can. I've done a bunch of projects without X, Y, or Z. So how can we think about reframing it? It's like, you might be able to tell me the exact same thing with a different word. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And that happens with our clients all the time. So just my couple thoughts.
Great point. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you, yes. Thank you.